Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving Behavioral Research Online, the Next 6 Months. I'm Joe Ridholm, editor of Quirk's Marketing Research Review. Our host today is Jonathan Asher, Executive Vice President at EyeSee. Jonathan, take it away.
Good morning, and thanks to Quirks for providing this platform for sharing insights and ideas. Thanks to our client colleagues who are providing their thoughts and experience, and thanks to all of you who are in attendance. So, where are we today? Obviously, these past few weeks have been filled with unprecedented change in the way we live and work, the products and services we use, and how we shop. And while there have recently been some encouraging signs from the health community, the future still remains uncertain in terms of how long things will continue as they are, and when and how we'll get back to normal, and what normal will actually look like. Of course, most of us are in the insights business, and so we realize that the best way to reduce uncertainty is with knowledge, and that knowledge is obtained by doing research. So we'd like to share with you results from several studies we've conducted recently. The first group of tracker studies where we gauge what people are doing, how they're thinking and feeling. We've done that in both the US and in Europe so that we have that perspective and comparison. In addition, we've done replication studies where we repeated studies that were conducted prior to the crisis, some 6 months or a year ago, to see if the results we get today with the current situation holds up, which would give us confidence in conducting research now. We've done that for shopper studies, e-commerce, and social media advertising. What we're seeing generally in terms of current attitudes is that people are feeling uncertain, which in a way is a positive, that only a quarter of the people across the US, France, and Germany are feeling pessimistic or negative, with 3/4 being either unsure of where things are going, or some of them actually feeling positive about where things are heading. So, with that uncertainty that we're seeing, I'm hoping Olivier can talk about, should we conduct research now as we have? And if so, is there any adjustments we should make to the way we conduct the research going forward?
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Great question, by the way. And this question is not only debated within insights, but in many other fields such as advertising. Should you invest in ads or not? What we see now is some companies, most not are pausing research at the moment. According to me, there are two key elements in that question: is the role of insights and how long will this situation last. A big part of the role of insights is to understand how the world is changing, and at the moment it's changing really fast. Most trends are actually not new, but the speed of change is unseen. For instance, e-commerce tripled in penetration in the last couple of weeks, and it's actually the role of insights to monitor and guide companies through these shifts. Secondly, how long will the consumer sentiment be volatile? If it's 2 months, you can pause research. If it's 6 months or more, it's much more difficult. Again, I don't want to do any predictions, but previous healthcare crisis lasts for 6 to 12 months. Economic recessions typically last 12 to 24 months. So personally, I expect that consumer sentiment will be volatile next 1 year, one year and a half. So I believe the question would rather be is how to conduct research instead of whether to conduct research. And ICS, we are trying to help companies in two ways. One is scenario analysis, and two, monitor over time. And there is much more to come, actually. So what do we mean actually with scenario analysis? Is we acknowledge that there are different types of reaction to the crisis. Some people are really worried, others are worried, and some are not really worried at the moment. And what we would do, for instance, if we would have 3 ads or 3 package designs, is we would test them across the 3 groups and see what comes out of it. So if all three groups align and choose as winning design number 1, then it makes sense to actually launch design number 1. Now, in another case, we might have that group B who's worried and group C who's mostly not worried prefer design number 2, and group A who's very normative would prefer design number 2, and the other 2 groups number 1. What we would recommend is still to launch design number 1, but monitor over time. Why? Is because we expect that group A will, their sentiment will stabilize over time. And then third option, what you could have is the 3 different groups should elect 3 different designs. What to do then is we expect that the design was not good at the start, so it makes sense to go back to the drawing board and start all over again. So option 1 to help to facilitate research is actually to do as well scenario analysis. The second option is to look a little bit different at studies. So you run the study now, then you assume the data that you get is as working assumptions. You can proceed with developing your new product further. You can develop further your creative and so forth, so that you don't have any delays at the end. Because if you delay now everything 6 to 12 months time, that means that your ad campaigns, your new innovations, your new marketing activities will be delayed, and profits will be as well delayed because of those actions. So best test now, assume those working assumptions. If you see significant changes within the market, then you can still confirm a little bit later whether the findings that you have now are still valid in the future.
And Olivier, could you tell us how you think the crisis is likely to impact the marketing industry going forward?
As mentioned before, I believe that the world will not be completely new tomorrow, but that trends will speed up. So what would be the situation in 5 years will be now in 1 year. And what we expected in 5 years is the importance of understanding behavior, going from 30% implicit measurement to 78% implicit measurement. This will be much faster. That trend will become much faster. Next to that, even now, much more important than last year is speed and cost-effective solutions. If the market is changing so fast, then speed to get the data, to get the insights will be much more important. Next to that, thirdly, what we expect is certain solutions that were coming up will be becoming much more important. For instance, e-commerce testing. We saw last year, 2 years ago, quite a lot of studies passing by. Not according to my expectations. I would have expected much more because you see the trends, but now you don't have any other choice than to invest in e-commerce because about 30 or 40% of people are now buying online.
Yes. So now turning to Luba, hoping you can help us understand how will the ongoing crisis impact various industries. We saw that there's some differences in sentiment in different countries, that things have hit different places at different times, and they're in a different state now. So what do you anticipate from a business standpoint going forward?
Good morning, everyone, and also good afternoon for those who are joining from Europe. I hope that you hear me well. I'm very excited to be part of this panel discussion, and I'm very passionate about the topic. So the question that you have just raised, I think that many companies and leaders are trying to answer today. But before we jump to the conclusions, let's build our hypothesis on the past, because it's not the first time the world faces crisis. Undoubtedly, pandemic is a situation humans never faced before that will impact everyone. However, every crisis has patterns we can learn from. I'm a big fan of Jeremy Gucci, the CEO of Trend Hunter, who recently published the book of Exploiting Chaos, that actually straight to the point and teaches us that chaos causes organizations to retreat. Crisis is not a good time for anyone, but it creates the environment to rethink and to reshape the strategy. Companies which find a way to recharge from the past will be successful. And we know the stories like Disney, CNN, Burger King, FedEx, Apple, Gillette, WhatsApp, Instagram, and many others have been found in the period of global economic recession. Crisis creates urgency and desire and experiment. So we cannot predict the future, but we can predict scenarios and capitalize on disruption. Today, people are locked down, being afraid to get sick, and this fear drives action. They're stockpiling, staying home, eating healthy, improving hygiene. This is observed behavior that can evoke several scenarios. So let's go one by one by the way how the situation can evolve. So first of all, categories benefiting with strong purchase growth during crisis might experience years ago decline, and the company should be prepared for that. Perception of health will be reinvented during this time, and turning to science with high importance of efficacy, safety, reassurance, and germs prevention. Sanitize might be the new definition of hygiene. Growth of unemployment will strengthen the importance of value for money. People will still buy premium, but they will become more particular about what premium they need. Staying home will reshape people's values, increases importance of community, reinforces experiences, and decreases importance of material possessions. We will have resilient, self-dependent people after coronavirus-19. Before crisis, more than 80% of people believe companies have an obligation to help solving social problems. Today, this is the most crucial as never before. Brands supporting health and well-being by taking care about employees or launching products in high demand. Brands that are making an impact by supporting society with charitable donations, or brands that lift spirits and shaping positive conversation will strengthen loyalty and grow. These trends are consistent across the globe. However, the situation will differ country by country, driven by external factors such as macroeconomics, politics, depths of pandemic.
Thank you, Liubov. I'd like to continue with that thinking and have you talk about what are the key concerns for your stakeholders at this time, because you're exposed to a lot of different people in the industry and within your company that have different issues that they're prioritizing.
Big organizations are inclined to protect what they have. This leads breakthrough companies to create the sort of structure that inhibits change, while crisis or chaos takes everyone out of the comfort zone and forces to consider new opportunities. It's very exciting time when the ideas that were rejected before are considered now. All companies, I believe, are working through transformation today when they are taking similar actions, such as reduce time to launch the product, find new ways of reaching alignment and getting internal approvals, enhance tolerance for risk, and finally relearn and rethink what our customers, what our people want. Eras of change give birth of unconventional ideas. At the crisis, we need to have an adaptive mindset to facilitate entrepreneurial change. Our focus should not be on protecting what we have, but rather on adapting to the next big thing.
Thank you. And then, Liubov, finally, are you looking for different insights now compared to before the crisis? What has popped up as being more important that needs to be dealt with right away, and because obviously priorities are changing? And how can agencies help people like you in your position, because obviously you've got to be juggling a lot of balls and dealing with new kinds of challenges. So how can we help?
Yeah, this is also a very good question. First of all, I would like to start from inside industry transformation that started several years ago, driven by the technology, and EyeSee is a great example, and high clutter of similar innovations appeared on the market daily. That was the moment when co-creation, design thinking, jobs to be done theories and methods became crucial to define people's struggle or unmet needs to come up with meaningful innovations. Even though many brands did a great job and disrupted the industries, shelves were full of products and the choice was equal to solve a mathematical equation. So COVID-19 actually cleaned up the assortment to highly rotated, trusted brands that stayed on shelf. People are buying mostly by benefit in a panic mode. So at the moment of crisis, consumers' needs change by the minute. It doesn't matter which industry we are talking about, who you are working for. People don't know what they need anymore because they are forced to think about bottom line of Maslow's pyramids of needs. That means in crisis, you cannot research what consumers' needs would be in a year period of time, as they don't know how their life will change. Therefore, many companies put on hold their research work. But the question is how to innovate today. And Olivier actually said that the whole crisis and the post-crisis period of time might take years. So we cannot stop our innovation work for a year or so. So first of all, learn changing consumers' behavior and needs daily to address with short-term innovation, activation, and communication aimed to support people in this difficult period of time is important. Secondly, enter white spaces. And it's no longer about asking consumers what they want. It's all about innovating and creating incremental categories and products. Entrepreneurial, constant experimentation, being humble, and break from the past will help to reinvent what people want and create revolutionary ideas. And finally, have a clear vision where your company can make an impact and care about people. Choose the battle to win. Stay choiceful. So to be successful when it comes to what companies and agencies can help us with, to be successful today, we need new skills and techniques. That means speedy solutions, instant connections with people to get answers for open questions in hours, not in days. We need to catch people in the moment of truth when they shop online, use products, or watch TV, immersing ourselves in the context of the problem and ask System 1 questions. Data providers are of low interest today. We need talents capable to connect the dots in the context of information chaos or overdose or lack of facts, discover insights in a dialogue, and tell a story to convince stakeholders to take the right decisions. We need to be authentic as well and start elevating our values to ensure that everything we do has an impact to the society, not only to our profits. This is the time when connections become more meaningful between people, customers, employees, everyone. I'm passionate about insight work because it allows to make an impact, not only to drive growth, but make lives of people better across the globe. So let's transform our roles and prove being business advisors in this difficult time together. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very impressive and meaningful. So despite all the uncertainty and confusion, it sounds like your advice is keep acting, take steps, and look forward. And that makes a lot of sense. Turning to using online behavioral research, Prabha, I wanted to ask you, what advice would you, because you had experience with this, if there are people who are using online behavioral research for the first time, or even for those who have used it but feel they need to use it much more at this time, what would you tell them about that?
So thanks for having me, Jonathan. The type of behavioral work, what you guys have been talking about, seems a lot, but from my personal experience, we have utilized all these techniques, seen the value it adds, and have learned where and how to use it. And in fact, as Liubov just mentioned, we are conducting research, similar research in a few countries right now in Europe, and just wrapped up another piece of work in the US, UK, and Australia. So I wouldn't say in this time of the COVID-19 crisis, yes, we have slowed down a bit, but we haven't completely slowed down. Probably there might have been a couple of in-person work we might have done if it was not for this COVID-19. But we are adapting to it, moving it online, utilizing the online behavioral tools we have access to, and still getting the reliable learnings to keep us moving forward. The point what Olivier mentioned earlier, it is because the opportunity cost of trying to catch up with everyone else once this returns to the new normal are just too big. So we have to keep going. We have to understand the consumer mindset and make sure the learnings are applicable to our business. From another angle, the concern is there, but obviously consumer mindset has changed a bit than what it was a couple of months back. And this mindset will likely remain the same for the next few or several months. So either you do the research now or wait for a couple of months. I don't think it'll make a lot of difference. But again, it depends on the topic you're trying to study, what you're trying to understand. But I'm talking about it in general. Now, looking at online behavioral research, it has its place, not just because of this COVID-19 crisis, but especially now with this crisis and the in-store, in-person type of research was probably likely to be shut down for the next few or several months. I think online behavioral work is the next best option to conduct certain types of research. Let's say, as an example, you're looking at a planogram or a shelf adjacency type of study, especially as a global brand. Setting it up as a virtual shopping study is faster, cost-effective, and it also makes the most sense as you're trying out multiple scenarios to benefit the category while also benefiting your brand. And if you're a retailer, you own the space. So probably setting a virtual shopping study might not have been a necessity for you. But with this COVID-19 situation, again, with the in-person type of work not a possibility now, this probably is an opportunity for you to try online virtual shopping and other behavioral research techniques to see the efficiencies it delivers. Well, my point here is simple. There are options to do research now. If you haven't tried online behavioral techniques before or have been slightly reluctant, I think this is now a time to try it and see the value it might add to your research toolkit.
Thanks, Prab. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Shruti, there's been a lot of indication that things are changing in terms of which product categories are meaningful to shoppers today, whether that's because of their needs or their priorities or what's available to them. So as you think about the changes in category relevance, how is that influencing your decision-making for businesses you're working on?
It's a great question. Hey, Jonathan. Hi, everyone. And it's a question that honestly, agnostic to the pandemic, I think any person in insights, that natural curiosity to understand, are you relevant and why, is a static provocation, right? I think the pandemic itself has raised to the forefront matters of relevancy. What are you offering now that is differentiated? What are you offering now that is unique? What are you offering now that all of a sudden puts your product, your brand on the forefront of mental salience and also physical salience? And again, I don't think that these are new questions by any means, but I think that our current situation has more so now than ever raised the bar when it comes to reconsidering who you are, what you offer, and why someone should turn to you now in truly a time of quote unquote need. So when you think about your category, when you think about your industry, and when you think about that micro space within the larger macro landscape, I think that current behavior has told us a few things in terms of reflecting on the past several weeks. It's kind of crazy to assume that seismic change can happen to how someone thinks of you in the context of a crisis. But I think that we've seen some changes in behavior. I think one of the main observations that have hit my screen is a default to familiarity. I think we're seeing a lot of brands that are bigger in nature turn a little bit faster right now. I think all of us, just look at your pantry, look at your fridge, look at your shelf. There are a lot of familiar brands, I think, taking up real estate, whereas maybe 2 months ago they weren't. And I'm not going to give away any of those big name brands, but these brands might not have been doing so well prior to the current situation. So I think asking why and specifically what attributes and characteristics are nudging some of that newfound relevance is really interesting. So again, this kind of default to larger brands that didn't quite have the same relevant footing as they do now. That's one of the major observations that I've been seeing. The second one is when it comes to the shopper journey. Just again, reflect on yourself. How do you now go to the store? Is the store a physical one or is it an online virtual one? What does truly your shopper journey look like? And then ask that question about your consumer. How is your consumer, given certain modifiers, who they're with, who's in the house, how big that household is, whose needs they actually have to serve on their shopping trip? What does that journey look like? And how has that changed? I think that's the second big observation, and some nuggets there around fewer trips. So we all talk about buy rate, right? What is buy rate? You decompose that into purchase size, into frequency. How much you buy and how often you go to the store. I think we're noticing that people are taking fewer trips, but they're stocking up. It's a little bit different from what was happening in the past, right? And then lastly, to kind of capstone this point, I think assortment and mix is changing. If people are stocking up, are they buying single serves? Maybe not, maybe not. So again, what does your lineup, your bench look like right now? And ultimately, how has your, Prab mentioned planogram, right? How has your planogram changed? And then my impression is that it's dynamic. And how we think about the next 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, it's a constant continuous learning stream around these observational points.
Thanks, Shruti. That's so great, very thoughtful, provocative at the same time, really giving us a good amount to think about. Thank you.
So to provide just a broad overview of what we covered today, which was quite a bit of good information from everybody's experiences, I guess it comes down to what I consider 3 broad areas and things to think about. The first is it makes sense to continue doing research at this time. Now, obviously, that varies some with what the situation is that your company is experiencing, and it may vary on what topics you do research. But for most marketers who are anticipating re-engaging with shoppers in the coming months, now is the time to formulate plans for what that re-engagement would look like so you can hit the ground running when the time is right. And part of that planning is to understand how shoppers are thinking, feeling, and behaving, and how they might respond to something new that you're planning to introduce in the market. And we've seen that the research does hold up, and there are ways to include questions about what their sentiment is at the moment, and we can split the data accordingly. But in addition, we want to be flexible because the current conditions are different, and some of the traditional approaches that we might have been comfortable using or been very accustomed to for many years simply may not be viable right now, or they may not work as well. So the idea of being open, we heard a couple of the panelists talk about it, be open to newer ways of doing things, either that you've used a little bit but not fully embraced or had never used. Now could be a good time to understand those more fully and frankly take a chance. Vet them carefully because you want to make sure you know what you're getting, because sometimes something looks like it's providing a outcome, but it may not. So fully understand it, but be open to new possibilities for these new conditions. And then finally, make sure you're also learning about these new behaviors. We know that people are doing things differently, how they're shopping, what kinds of products they're buying, how they're using products. Let's make sure that we're not leaving those opportunities ignored. Just as simple as e-commerce, much more shopping online for CPG products than was ever the case. Now, it may not be exactly perfect. People are finding a lot of out of stock or long delivery times, so it may not be fully representative. But since people are doing it, it's a good opportunity for you to understand how are they doing it? What are the challenges? How can we better address their needs? So those are the things I think we're all sort of coming away with, that it makes sense to keep doing research, think about how you might do it differently, and also what are some other things to be testing that you might not have thought of otherwise. And I'll just see if our speakers have any quick one thing to take away. We had talked about that as a possibility. I think we still have time for that. Prab?
Yeah, I can jump in really quick. To me personally, online behavioral research, it creates efficiencies in executing research, especially on a global scale. And as I mentioned earlier, anytime you combine implicit and explicit techniques, the learnings are just rich. You have to try it if you haven't to see where it fits in your research toolkit.
Great, thanks. Shruti, is there one thing you want people to take away from today's session?
Yeah, I would say we're all natural, again, consumer marketers, and I would say put on that detective hat now more so than ever, be alert, and don't be afraid to go back and revisit how you typically approach learning and think through it in more of a disruptive manner as we're all heading into a largely virtual environment.
Great, thank you. Liubov, one big takeaway?
Yes. So I think that this was a super great, very inspiring session. And I think that we are living at the time of uncertainty, that many things are not clear, but this is exactly what creates a good environment for change and for great innovation.
Okay, thank you everyone for your great insight on these topics. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. If you have additional thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can use the email on the slide here. And also stay tuned for our next webinar on e-commerce, which is coming up on May 5th. We think you'll enjoy that information that we share as well and look forward to seeing you then.